There's a particular kind of silence that falls over a hearing room when someone who always has an answer suddenly has none. It's not the polite pause while someone gathers their thoughts. It's the heavy quiet that descends when everyone present simultaneously realizes they're witnessing something significant. That silence lasted 17 seconds during a Senate hearing. And those 17 seconds tell a story about documents, decisions, and exactly who gets protected when uncomfortable information threatens to surface. Cash. Patel sat before the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee for what was scheduled as a routine oversight review of FBI document classification protocols, the kind of hearing designed to sound bureaucratic enough that most cameras stay away. But Senator Sheldon Whitehouse had been requesting this session for nearly a year. And when he finally placed a document face down on the table and then calmly flipped it over, the temperature in that room changed completely. The document in question was FBI internal correspondence from November 2019, originating from the Palm Beach field office. It contained a list of individuals who had documented contact with Jeffrey Epstein at his Palm Beach residence over a 6-year period. When originally created, it carried a confidential classification standard for investigative material. But in February of this year, 17 days after Patel became FBI director, that document was reclassified to top secret with special access requirements. That's the highest level of classification available. The kind that buries information deep, enough that access becomes extraordinarily difficult, even for people with security clearances. Reclassification at that level doesn't happen automatically. It requires direct authorization from a specific official. When Whitehouse's team traced who approved this particular upgrade, they found the request came from the director's office itself. In his first weeks running the FBI, before his senior team was even fully staffed, one of Patel's earliest substantive actions was making this Epstein-related document significantly harder to access than it had ever been before. Whitehouse asked. Why? He asked. Directly, whether Patel made it a priority to reclassify a document naming individuals connected to Epstein. Patel responded that such decisions are based on law enforcement sensitivities and national security considerations. He couldn't discuss in open session. That's standard protective language. But then, Whitehouse introduced a second piece of evidence's sworn deposition from a former Epstein household employee, entered into federal court record in 2020. The testimony described observing Epstein entertaining guests on dozens of occasions, including young women who appeared underage, being introduced to his associates. Among those associates specifically named in sworn testimony was Donald Trump. The deposition had been in FBI custody since 2020, part of the same investigative record that contained the document Patel had reclassified. Whitehouse asked whether Patel was aware, when authorizing the reclassification, that the investigative record contained sworn testimony naming Trump in connection with potentially criminal activity at Epstein's residence. That's when the 17 seconds happened. No deflection, no carefully constructed non-answer, just silence, while every calculation ran through in real time. The question had no safe answer. Acknowledging awareness would mean the reclassification was deliberate protection of a specific name. Claiming ignorance would mean either authorizing a major classification change without knowing its contents, or simply not telling the truth. Both options carried consequences. Then Whitehouse presented a third document on internal FBI action memorandum, dated 2 days before the reclassification was authorized. The memo recommended that all documents in the Epstein investigative record containing references to current or former senior government officials be reviewed for upgraded classification on an expedited basis, with priority given to documents mentioning the current administrations, principal officers, and their prior associations. The memorandum bore the routing number from Patel's office. 17 seconds of silence, again. And when Patel finally spoke, he invoked deliberative process protections, declining to discuss internal communications. That's technically proper procedure, but the optics are unmistakable. A man whose public identity centers on being the truth teller, the one willing to say what others won't, sat in that chair and declined to answer whether he knew powerful names were in documents before, making them exponentially harder to access. This matters because it's not speculation or inference. It's documented chronology. An action memo recommending upgraded classification for documents referencing senior officials. 2 days later, a reclassification happens. The reclassification makes a document containing sworn testimony about Trump and Epstein significantly harder to obtain. When asked directly about the connection between these events, the person who authorized it all said nothing for 17 seconds, then declined to answer. The documents Whitehouse referenced are now part of the Congressional record. They don't disappear when news cycles move on, and the questions they raise about who gets protected, who makes those decisions, and what happens to information the public might want to see, those questions remain regardless of how much silence greets them in hearing rooms. What happens next depends on whether committees pursue these threads with sustained pressure, or whether attention shifts before follow-through occurs. Congressional investigations either maintain momentum or they fade. Court challenges over document access either succeed or get tied up in procedural disputes. Public attention either stays focused or moves to newer developments. But the chronology established in that hearing room remains regardless. The documents exist. The dates line up. The silence spoke louder than any answer could have. For coverage that tracks how these stories develop beyond the initial headlines, subscribe to Allura Updates. Because understanding what 17 seconds of silence actually means requires paying attention to what comes after, not just what happened in the moment. And what comes after is where the real story gets written.